What will it take for Zimbabwe to have its own currency? I think this is a question and it's a debate that we have been avoiding for quite some time. But I think if you look at the phenomenon of the goat, as we try to encourage people to make payments of, say, school fees using goats, although the minister has explained that what they are trying to do is to allow the local authorities to have some kind of auction, or to be the ones who are handling the goats transactions, so that schools are not becoming markets for goats, but parents are able to approach the local authorities, and then they're able to convert their goats into cash, and then they can pay their school fees using that cash. So it's something which has not been properly explained even by the minister himself. This is something that needs to be properly explained. But as we struggle to find solutions, I think we need to rekindle the debate on what it takes for a country to have its own currency. What does it take to create your own currency? And so I started asking this one question as to, originally in 1980, what really happened? How did we end up with the Zimbabwe dollar? How did we get rid of the Rhodesian dollar? And what happened to the Rhodesian pound? Because at some point Rhodesia was using the Rhodesia pound, which was at par with the pound sterling in Britain. Then when they decided to declare independence, they adopted the Rhodesian pound. In fact, they adopted the Rhodesian dollar. Okay, but what I'm interested to know is, how did we convert the Rhodesian dollar into the Zimbabwe dollar? What really happened there? Because I think there could have been a problem that we simply converted, but I don't know. We may have simply converted, like we're doing with the bond notes, where we've declared that one bond note is equivalent to $1. Okay, but we are seeing shortages and we've got a liquidity crunch. The bond notes which were printed don't seem to be enough for the economy. So we need to go back to the basics of what money is and how do we create money. Okay, I'll give an example of how the Americans and the British have created something called a fiat currency. Now, a fiat currency is not backed by anything besides trust. So trust in the government, in that the American government and the British governments have actually, what they have done is they have created a brand for their own countries and for their currency, to the extent that the US dollar and the pound sterling are sought after currencies. So there's a demand for that currency, which is why I think it's possible for countries like Zimbabwe to use the US dollar, because of the demand on the US dollar. So currencies suffer the same demand and supply issues that are associated with other goods and services. So my interest is to know what happened, because before I continue with what really happened when we converted from the Rhodesian dollar to the Zimbabwe dollar, I'll just finish off explaining how the fiat currency for the Americans works, for example. So how does it get that demand? Why is it that there is a demand for the US dollar? And it goes back to the history of the American dollar and how it changed from being backed by, say, gold to being backed by nothing except demand. So the demand for the US dollar, but why is there demand for the US dollar? Okay, so there's something called the petrodollars, okay, which means that the American dollar is sought after world over by every country which needs to buy oil from the Middle East, because the buying of oil can only be done in US dollars. Okay, so there's a demand for oil, which means there's a demand for the US dollar. So they've created a surrogate backing for the US dollar, okay, because they know that people need oil. And I think it's easy for the Americans to control the supply of oil. Everything is down to demand and supply, and everything is down to scarcity. So if you make the availability of oil a bit scarce, and I'm told the Americans have actually they buy as much as they can of the oil, and then they store some of it so that they only release it when they have to. And sometimes they would rather buy than release their own. So they control the supply of oil, which is why they've gone to all these wars in the Middle East, because then they have a say in how much oil is released, and so they can control the US dollar, or the demand for the US dollar. So in terms of Zimbabwe, okay, what I'd like to know is, when we changed from the Rhodesian dollar to the Zimbabwe dollar, what was backing that Zimbabwe dollar? Was it gold? Was it other minerals? What was the backing for that? Was it a fiat currency, which I doubt? And the bond notes, what is backing them? Are they backed by the US dollars? What's going on there? So these are the questions that I have. And if there are economists who understand these things and can assist, I'd appreciate, because I know that other people are also going to benefit. So those are the questions that we need to ask as we think about maybe the possibility of bringing the Zimbabwe dollar back. But obviously the governor has time and again reiterated that they are not planning to bring the Zimbabwe dollar back at any time. At any time soon. When the bond notes were introduced, people thought maybe that is the Zimbabwe dollar coming back through the back door. But it is a Zimbabwe dollar because it only operates in Zimbabwe. Okay, so what really happened? How do we set up a currency? Okay, do we set up a fiat currency? What will back it? How do we create demand for the currency? How is a currency related to the economic output? Because we can see that in America, their currency is dependent on the prices of oil, because they determine the supply and demand for oil. In fact, they know there's a demand, they just control the supply, which is why they go to war, because they need to keep tabs on how much oil is released and what the price of oil is, because that affects the American dollar. Okay, so there is a question for you Zimbabweans. What happened in 1980? What was backing our Zimbabwe dollar? Why did it collapse? And what can we do to come up with another currency, with another local currency, with our own money? Because as it is, we don't have a currency, and we need to do something about that. Thank you for listening.